are you all doing? Great. What a beautiful day today. It's a little cloudy, but it's so thrilling, so great to be here. I'm so glad and honored that I get to be in the presence of so many colleagues and friends, new friends. Did you all do the homework that I asked you to do last night? Those of you that were at the opening reception? Remember I gave you an ask? Please leave that place with 3 new people. Who did it? Raise your hand. Okay. Excellent. This meeting is about our community. So let's be a community. Let's talk to one another. Let's be with each other. Let's learn from each other. So one more to do. Today, please continue to meet 3 new people. Okay, introduce yourselves. If you're too shy, ask one of us. We have no problems introducing you to people, but please meet one another. That's what we're here for. So I'm Anna Hunsinger. I am a member of the Consortium Leadership Board. I wear some other hats that we don't need to go into today, and I get to open things up this morning. So we're gonna start first by a very important acknowledgement that we need to make. We're meeting here in Nashville, Tennessee, the indigenous lands of the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Shawnee, and Yuki peoples. We honor their enduring relationship to this region and recognize the deep histories, contributions, and cultural resilience of indigenous peoples, past and present. As we come together for this event today, a space dedicated to collaboration, innovation, and connection, let us just spend a moment reflecting on our responsibilities to indigenous communities and commit to continue learning and continued action. Okay, one of the hats that I wear is as the principal investigator for awards that the National Science Foundation has vested in support of the Minority Serving Cyber Infrastructure Consortium. This meeting and your participation here has been made possible by the National Science Foundation. So even though they cannot be here in this room, but they will be on video in subsequent meetings, maybe they're watching me right now, so everybody say hi. Hi, NSF. We're deeply appreciative, not just for the support of NSF, but for the belief that NSF has that MSCC can be a change agent to transform what we can do through cyber infrastructure in support of our community. So thank you, NSF. Okay, so this is our 3rd annual meeting. This is one of the summits, if you will, a milestone opportunity for MSCC. I cannot believe that this is our 3rd one. This is our biggest meeting so far. And I know that the empty chairs, they're gonna get filled, because by the numbers, we had over 200 people register for this meeting. We have a great component of student participation, as you can see there, and this is great too. We have quite a number of our so incredible HBCUs represented here. So raise your hand if you're from one of the HBCUs. I wanna thank you all for being here. We have 7 tribal colleges and universities represented. So could you please raise your hand too, so we could recognize you. Excellent. And then we have collaborators and representatives from other organizations. Still, raise your hand, please, so we can also thank you for being here. All right. So without further ado, we need to move on with the program because we have a great opening keynote ready. If you haven't already, please download the app. The details are either on our website or just ask someone from the staff. You can see in the little badges that they have a little special ribbon, and you can follow what's going on with the program. We have a really fantastic program ready for you, and we cannot wait to get started. One last thing, I want to thank my colleagues that not only founded and had this vision for MSCC, many of which continue to work very hard with me, with the staff, with all of you, to advise us and provide input into the direction of the MSCC and what we do. So I'm sorry, I'm gonna make you stand up, but could I please ask my fellow members of the Consortium Leadership Board to stand up very quickly so we can, thank you. And they also have a little red ribbon there. They're your ambassadors as well to everything that's going on with MSCC as well. Okay, so I get the sincere pleasure of now introducing a wonderful, outstanding, I'm gonna call you like a Wonder Woman, because you are a Wonder Woman. So Miss Stacy Pretty on top, she's the operations manager at Salish Kootenai College, and she's going to be our next speaker. She will be introducing us to our next speaker as well. So here we go. And thank you, Stacy.
Hesquex Pesia, Inchesqui Stacy Pretty on top. Good morning, everybody. My name is Stacy Pretty on top, and I'm a member of the Colville Confederated Tribes from Nispelem, Washington. I come from the Arrow Lakes, Okanagan, and Wenatchee bands. I am the IT Services Operations Manager. I've been at Salish Kootenai College for over 20 years now, so I'm excited that I get to introduce today's opening keynote speaker, Karen Colbert, a strategist, data scientist, and nationally recognized advocate for STEM, AI, and culturally responsive education. Karen currently serves as the General Education Department Chair and lead math faculty at Keweenaw Bay Ojibwa Community College, where she is helping to build the next generation of scholars and leaders by advancing quantitative and computational literacy. She was named the RStudio Scholar in 2021 and became the first data carpentries instructor in training among tribal colleges and universities, a milestone in expanding access to data science, education, in indigenous communities. Beyond the classroom, Karen serves on the Faculty Advisory Committee for the American Indian College Fund and is a powerful voice in the national conversation around digital sovereignty, equity, and the future of AI. Her work ensures that AI becomes a tool for empowerment, not erasure, and that all learners, especially non-traditional, re-entry, and adult scholars are included in shaping what becomes next. Please join me in welcoming Karen Colbert.
So first, please join me in welcoming Karen Colbert, Department Chair, General Education Math at Keweenaw Bay Ojibwa Community College.
AI is definitely redefining the classroom, and AI might be able to analyze patterns, as you said, patterns of data, but it lacks wisdom. I will always believe that faculty are the trees and the root of your institutions. And the fruit that the faculty bear will feed your institutions, they will feed your students, and that's how we're going to thrive.
Beautiful.
The day that you stop learning, the day that you stop interacting with these tools, and you back away from what's happening in society, what happens is that we're preparing students, but now we're preparing students for a future that does not exist. Anin, bonjour gakina, bino gijeb, bino gako, bino gijik, Karen Indigenous, Ninda Gichigoming, Ninda Keweenaw Ojibwa Community College, Niminwe Ndo Mioma. I am so honored to greet you this morning in a room full of my ancestors' dreams. My name is Karen Colbert. I am the General Education Department Chair and lead math faculty. Can we go to the next slide? Lead math faculty at Keweenaw Ojibwa Community College. I have been married for 20 years and I have 9 children. So the joke is that I have been to preschool 9 times. I homeschooled for about a decade, and it was an amazing experience. So now you've heard my voice. I played the intro intentionally. You've heard my voice, but now I want you to hear about my mission. And this is what keeps me up at night. We talk about sovereignty, but yet our data is still housed on someone else's server. And we celebrate inclusion, but it's our voices in our communities, they're still training modules that were never intended for us. And so why is the digital future being written about us, but not by us? And so that is the title for my talk this morning, is we won't code switch for the algorithm. And my hope today is that this morning, that everything you think you know about data sovereignty is about to change. Now, most people hear data sovereignty and they picture a little thumb drive that sits in somebody's office or on a desk, or it's on a server that's in a basement. But real sovereignty isn't where the terabytes live. It's who gets to tell the story of those terabytes. I am a data scientist by trade, and my area of research is in decolonized data visualizations, social network analysis, predictive modeling, and monitor and evaluation methods. And I call that data storytelling. And storytelling isn't just reporting facts, but it's deciding which facts become truth and for whom. And most of us just equate data storytelling because DS is an area of study, but we call DS these really slick dashboards and these fancy charts. But when you study what the literature says, that it tells a very different story. That data storytelling is not storytelling with data, but a real data story violates expectations. It replaces old cause and effect belief with an unexpected one. And that violation sparks surprise, suspense, engagement, and learning. And that's the same cognitive chain that every good scientist uses. So in other words, sovereignty isn't about where the physical location of where the data sits, but it's about the author and those causal narratives that are created. So when our communities don't control the narrative, the algorithm quietly writes us directly out of the future. And the literature, it argues that data stories have to swap a new causal model, not just decorate. So today you're going to see some things that I did create. So I created everything that you're going to see here. But it's not just about the creation of these beautiful tools, but it's about the story that it tells about us. And when we link this to what's happening now with AI bias. If training data explains success within the proximity of a dominant culture, then the causal story again begins to erase us. So this is a framework that we use in tribal colleges for our research epistemologies. This is called the two-eyed seeing. What if every decision in your institution that was made for the next 5 years was based on data that could only see with one eye? Now, I wear glasses, so I know exactly what that does for me when they ask me to cover one eye, right? My depth perception is off. And the two-eyed seeing is an indigenous guided research approach, or you could call it a framework. And it serves as a guiding principle that allows us to weave into many different qualitative and quantitative methodologies that ensure that both indigenous and Western knowledges are braided together on equal footing. And it actually clarifies both the physiological, the philosophical stance, and the technical rigor of all of the studies that I do. So it means that learning to view the world one eye with the indigenous knowledge and one eye with Western science simultaneously. Neither eye blinks and neither eye squints. But together they give depth perception that one single eye can't. So, two-eyed seeing, it inherently challenges that dominant assumption in Western science and AI that knowledge is completely neutral and objective and universally applied. And I'll be honest, I've struggled with that a lot because for some reason we're still pretending that math is neutral, that data is neutral, but it's not. It's cultural. It has a cultural context. I mean, even when you think about cultures and their bases, when I teach in my math courses, I literally teach from that position of language revitalization because that's how we understand. So in Western data science, which is what I was trained under, I have a master's degree in data science from a university. So Western data science, there's this myth that the algorithms and the data sets themselves are unbiased and that they reflect reality. And that comes a lot from statistics, right? From statistical power, you'll hear a lot about, p-values and t-tests, right? And people don't understand that, your N has to be big. So the joke was back then, I have 9 children, so I almost have a complete data set, right? I could almost do a statistically significant event with any of my children at any intersection. But think about what's happening in these recent events and these experiences. The AI systems show that it's far from unbiased and neutral. And that we're learning in this course that I'm teaching, I'm going to tell you about in just a second. And what we're learning is both fascinating and it's disappointing. AI models are trained on predominantly Western or colonial data, and they've demonstrated that they still have those systemic biases against non-Western cultural groups. Bias exists because many of these algorithms were trained with one eye. And because the algorithm was trained with the one eye and the other one shut, that the two-eyed seeing is what exposes that illusion of objectivity. But the two-eyed seeing method, it asks 3 questions. Who collected the data? Whose worldview is framed from the questions that we're asking about that data? And whose story does that output tell? Now, the two-eyed seeing, it explicitly rejects this hierarchy, but it braids the 2 knowledge systems together, and it shows that indigenous and Western frameworks are knowing and distinct, and they're whole, but yet they're made stronger when they're in tandem. So the framework literally creates a space of mutual respect because indigenous knowledge isn't forced into these conformed Western methods, and Western science isn't uncritically presumed as neutral or superior, which is what many of us were trained in when you get trained in higher education in the K through 12 system. So this is one way that we are leading with cultural integrity instead of code switching to fit into these algorithms. Now, this is a model that I designed when I was trying to figure out how to measure success in my community. So this is an example of what we call, it's a social network analysis. And so this is an example of a network, and I've kind of zoomed in on the parts that I am interested in, very student-centered. If I was to ask you, right, of this complete, this really focal point where you have the student in the center and then each of those ties, which single tie in this network could you remove before that student experience collapses? So it's a trick question. Because if any one of those connections are missing, the entire system begins to deteriorate. And that was just from my own experiences. So social network models connection. And they measure the connection by either the existence of a tie or the strength of a tie. And this particular model, it leans into the theory of the strength of weak ties. And that basically says that having multiple weak ties is better than having no tie at all. And this literally was my lifeline. Because at Keweenaw Bay, prior to the pandemic, we had a collaboration with Carnegie Math Pathways, and I had taken on this opportunity to learn to teach a different way. Those of you that teach, you were not taught how to teach. You just teach because you're an expert in your field. So there's a lot to learn about what learning is and how to build connection in classrooms. And so I was willing to. What we were doing wasn't working anyway, so I was willing to try something new. And it worked. We took on decolonized teaching practices. I had mentors. I had a network of other TCU faculty. We were willing to, really dig deep into what was happening. And at one point, which is something amazing for a community college, 40%, more than 40% of our entire student population was enrolled in a math course for credit. It was powerful in statistics. And then the pandemic completely disrupted what we were doing in that in-person setup, and I really had to think deeply about how to build that back. So I had to study about what it was that we were doing in the classroom, the teaching, the content, the engagement frameworks, the inquiry-based learning, the place-based learning, right? All of the methodologies. Because I didn't want what had happened to mean that now all of a sudden I have to sacrifice the integrity of what learning is to me. And so people assume that just because we integrate AI and technology that we inherently get robbed of the learning experience. We still need to teach traditional skills even in the AI era. And some will say, oh, well, the AI tools, the sky is the limit. No. The limit is in the skill of the user to interpret the tool's capabilities. So yes, I teach math, and yes, my students use tools, but because of the way that I teach, it does not rob students of that learning engagement. YouTube University and Google have been around for decades, and that has not inherently removed higher education as obsolete either. So as an instructor, this is what you get from me: implementation, execution, accountability, support, and community. And that's what that looks like when I teach in a math course. So now that I have figured this out and I have figured how to guide this in my classroom, now I teach what's called high flex. And this was the framework that kept me grounded. And I was able to meet the needs of my students, my adult, non-traditional learners, without compromising integrity, AKA grade inflation. Right? A lot of people will be like, well, how do you do that? I don't give extra credit. But I'm also not concerned that my students are not going to get what they need from class. So high flex means that students get to decide where they are when they learn. But it does not mean Netflix and chill. So students in different domains, they don't pay a different price. So if you're an online student, you don't pay a different price than if you're an in-person student. So that also means, as far as I'm concerned, that your quality of access to me as the instructor should not be different. And the 4 directions is one way that helps me to see, am I reaching my students in a way that's equitable? And when any one of those directions is missing, that unbalance, it's definitely felt. I feel out of control, and my students begin to start to feel isolated. So the academic definition for this network, what you're looking at as a social network model, there are nodes, and each of the nodes represents an actor. So for me, it's the 4 learning domains and the student. And then the ties would represent the relationship. And so the strength of a tie, you can measure how much information is going in one direction. Which of these ties are single direction or bidirectional? The support, the trust. When I first started working with social network analysis, it was literally to measure trust factors. And so that is one of the key components that we use because we know that in our institutions that's important. Think of it as educational oxygen, those ties. So multiple weak ties, it's still providing richer information flow, higher resilience, and that theory inherently is what saved my class. Deep learning. I teach math, and we are constantly trying to find analogies and relationships that help our students to understand the material deeper. We know that a lot of tools that are used are speech recognition, image recognition, natural language processing, classifiers that are used to detect, to learn what the data already represents. So we know that there are frameworks for deep learning that are already embedded. We just have not ever classified them and labeled them. So the challenges of machine learning deep learning models is that they require a huge amount of data to learn from. So when there's no data available, the models will struggle. And a lot of times these models have a greater potential for bias because there's data that's missing. And what you all don't realize is that when data is missing, and this is me telling you the behind the scenes of data, a data scientist, we impute data. That means we put data there that's not there, and we use statistical power to decide what should be there. And a lot of times, that is what leads to the potential for bias, and it leads to inaccurate predictions, right? So think about facial recognition. My kids for a long time could unlock my phone because the models in the beginning were not trained on a person with features that looked like mine. So it had a hard time distinguishing from one side to the other. And then just consider all the other limitations of deep learning. And when I think about indigenous deep learning, the components of that model, the most important parts are language, land, and legacy. And so when I say that we won't code switch for the algorithm, this is what I mean. That we bring language in as training data, that we embed land as a living feature, and we encode legacy as context. So that is indigenous deep learning. And it's the fastest route to data sovereignty in our communities in this AI era. So this is a course that I developed this summer because of the needs that we were seeing, and we needed someone to really help our students learn from the ground up. And so I developed this course. It's called Storytelling with AI, an Analysis of Anishinaabe Language and History. And we wanted this course to be a tools-based course that also taught ethics, and it affirmed and translated our mission statement of language revitalization within a single course. So all things were generated with artificial intelligence using zero-shot prompting, chain of thought prompting tools. The other challenge that I had was I did not have a budget. So everything that I did had to be free. And you'll start to learn that when you get out there and people are telling you about all these amazing things that AI can do, it won't do that for free. When I teach the course, it's from the framework of the Ojibwa word of the day, and that is a brand, a very famous brand. There are two very, influential individuals who have a brand called Ojibwa Word of the Day. One is Anton Troyer, And so with his work, we build digital personas that focus on how AI tools can support cultural revitalization efforts. And we build comparable approaches for teaching language. And we study the ethical implications of AI that studies indigenous knowledge. And we do all of this centered on a work of the Endangered Language Project. And so that basically means that, most languages have extensive histories, and there's no need to frame a language in a particular age. So we instead focus on the connections between the language and the community and the use cases in the land. This is James Vokalage Kagegabo. He also has an Ojibwe Word of the Day brand. And we look at qualitative analysis techniques and how AI is used to honor indigenous knowledge. We also look at a new framework that was inspired by a scholar, and I just connected with her. Her name is Dr. Susan Freese, and she examines how conversational AI methods can serve as reflection partners rather than replacing human interaction. Because what we've learned is using these tools for language, they were not trained as qualitative. So qualitative researchers, which I am also, I'm a mixed methods researcher, we look at coding. AI tools were not designed for qualitative coding, they were designed for conversational analysis. And so part of Dr. Freese's work is to look at how can we use it in the way it was intended and trying to force it to be used in a way that's not going to serve us. There are AI tools that do translate. This was, I was a speaker last week at the Tribal College faculty convening, and there was some concern about whether or not the tools could even understand our language. And this is proof that they do. AI tools have been trained in the most part to translate some indigenous languages. This is Anishinaabe-Moan. So different Ojibwe dialects, which is one of the ones that I speak. There's the Canadian dialect. We use triangulation still to confirm that these tools are translating in a proper way. So triangulation meaning we use the University of Minnesota's Ojibwe dictionary, we have Ojibwe chat, and then our local elders. So this particular slide, the literal translation is these were the instructions on a daily assignment. So it says everything we do in the beginning should help us use Anishinaabe-Moan well in AI. First, if the AI can supply the exact Anishinaabe word you need, share even a little of the story behind that word. When you set out to build an Anishinaabe-Moan API, you need to start by thinking carefully about what you will use it for, and then ask the AI to give you the terms you need to make sure the result is faithful to the language. So scholars like Michael Running Wolf and organizations like First Language AI Reality, Indigigenius, and Tech Natives, they all have missions very similar to see AI used in an extension of human curiosity. So Michael Running Wolf, he literally has a brand where he goes all over the country trying to use, he has a background in computer science, and he is building these tools so that they can have language revitalization, not necessarily for Ojibwe right now, but for other languages. And so I do try to support his work by telling people that we are out there, we are trying to do the work, and we're trying to do it in a way that's centered on our values. We also talk about the controversy of language and ownership, and I feel like my adult learners can handle that. I'm not so sure that kids will understand. And so I have a hard time supporting this perpetuation of this narrative that we need to support these boot camps for kids, these AI boot camps. We've got to get AI into the elementary schools. But then on the other side, you're telling my adult learners that somehow if they even look at these AI tools, that they're being unethical and they're trying to cheat the system. When in my opinion, my students, my adult learners, are the ones that need to be developing these tools and deciding on the boundaries. Kids cannot understand that. And so if you don't understand how even the system is trying to get around that, you have to think deeply about what are we asking out of our kids, but we're skipping right over our adults. Because the adults are going to be the ones that can critically think and give that pushback. Now, this is some of the things that I have made. I'll be honest, I am having a blast co-creating with my students these visuals, these audio clips, and developing podcasts and social media content so that they can be shared widely. I'm learning a lot. I teach prompt engineering, indigenous research methods, and large language modeling, basically in this course, in addition to that context of Ojibwe Word of the Day. So what you're going to see now is an example of some work that we've done so far. I'm only sharing like a 20-second version of it. So if you could play the storytelling podcast with co-host.
Bonjour, bonjour, Keweenaw. Welcome to Storytelling with AI. I'm your host, Karen Colbert.
Hey, everybody. I'm your co-host, Darren.
So that's just an example. Tools like Notebook LM, Gemini, you can use to develop two-speaker podcasts. So the problem is, if you are limited to what is free, you cannot do a two-speaker podcast. So what you saw there, even though you're just like, well, it was just two people speaking, Notebook LM will give you a default of two people speaking. But the problem is that you can feed it the same resources, and each and every one of us would have a completely different podcast. You cannot customize it at all. And we've also learned that it does not emphasize the things that you want it to emphasize. You have to continue to rerun the model over and over. So you can actually use Gemini 2.5 Pro to build the narrative that you want that podcast to say, and then you can, do all that other animating stuff. But then the problem is you have to separate it into two different people. You want to think about how is a podcast actually shared, right? You think about a podcast would be, either a video with two people in the frame. And so contextualizing that with animation makes it even more challenging. So my students aren't quite there yet, but this is just an example of what's possible. And again, I purposely put myself at a $0 budget because I really wanted to push the boundaries of these tools and I wanted to understand what are the limitations. Now, the don't fall for all the AI hype. We play this, please.
So when right go wrong, just say a little prayer, get your money, man, life goes on.
Yes, I am hopeful for today.
Right? I spent 17 hours trying to guess what this prompt wanted me to do, and my doggone avatar still had 4 legs. I mean, people are just like, oh, you just do that. So, I show that to show that, yes, I'm going to show you the polished version. I'm going to show you the clean version. But I also want you to know that what is happening behind the scenes is messy. And what I had to teach my students is if you only get so many chances, you cannot be sloppy with your ask. So you need to use the research and the literature to learn how do you prompt. Because if you only get 4 chances, many of these will give you so many credits and then you have to wait 24 hours before you can try again. Again, I'm doing this because I want to limit myself to what's free. Yes, we could buy all the things and all the tools, but is that necessary? In order for you to know what you're getting, what you're paying for, you also have to know what are the boundaries of what's possible if you don't. And then my students get to ask those tough questions. The avatar that you see on most of these slides is an avatar that was not created with a picture of me, but it was with prompting. And what most of you don't realize is that in these prompts, I am a racially ambiguous woman. That is how it sees me. And if I do not describe myself that way, I tend to have a blonde ponytail. In a business suit, though. I'm still in a business suit. The world in technology is definitely evolving, and it's easy to get swept away with all these latest trends. But the key point is this, that the difference between the genuine advancements and the fluff, AI has incredible potential, but it is not there for everyday applications to get so excited about what it can do. The vital way to approach AI is with that discerning eye. Asking the right questions, seeking credible sources to guide your understanding. Oh, I missed one. AI should be an extension of human curiosity, but not a replacement. So miigwech for joining me. I want to invite each and every one of you to follow me and connect with me on social media. Consider joining my mailing list. I try to update my social media to give the world a behind-the-curtains look at what's happening in our community. I do have a book coming out July 4th. It is called The Algorithm Wasn't Built for Us. And that book is basically, it's not a math book. I have so many people asking me, if it's a math book, I'm not going to understand it. It's not a math book. It's my positionality as a tribal college faculty and my experience navigating the system in higher education that essentially devalues educators while benefiting from our gifts and treating us as resources to be used, but not educational leaders to be honored. And so this book is my direct mission to flip that script by showing you what's happening and how I got to places like these so that we really can, as faculty, serve and advocate for our communities. Any questions? I was told to leave time for questions. So any questions or wonderings or comments? And I think they have the microphone set up so that you can be heard in the recordings.
Good morning. Hector Torres, Bethune-Cookman University. I teach math and science. And I am wondering about the other languages, for example, Spanish. So my native language is Spanish, right? So what strategies would you use? Is it the same ones or different strategies to deal with other languages that we have in our nation here?
This is a great question. So he's asking a question about, the way that the language is centered when we use these tools. You do, when you teach math, do have to understand the translation. We know that when we treat English as the default language, and then you learn another language, you learn that there is not always a one-to-one translation. You'll go to somebody and you'll say, how do I say this? We don't say rhinoceros. I don't know how to say rhinoceros, right? So one of the things that you'll have to do is you need to understand how the value of numbers works in that translation. So in Chippewa and Ojibwa languages, even the number 5 does not mean 5 fingers. It means I have one hand. And then when you look at the translation of what those words mean, right, when you say, when you count from 5 to 6, you always have to have that I have one hand translation. You also need to know, was it a base 2 culture? Was it a base 10 culture? Was it base 20 culture? I mean, there's so many things within that you have to have nested in. So that would be where you would have to start, is what is the direct translation to the word of the value of numbers? And then you would have to check to make sure that when you're embedding it, because remember, these tools were created English-based. So they're not always going to understand in our culture what is a hand. And we've struggled with that a lot. That's why we still have to use triangulation. What I will say is that Ojibwa and I believe Spanish, depending on which dialect that you're using, the models have been trained on whatever is accessible and free. So the Canadian dialect of Ojibwa is accessible and free, and so the model has predominantly been trained on that. I would assume that for the Spanish model, it might be the same, that whatever is accessible and free. So you would have to look to see, is it the Spain? Is it the Mexican? Is it the, right, which one is it? And then based on the interpretation, it may call one hand something completely different, but we call one hand 5. So it's a great question. But yes, when I started teaching, one of the things people don't realize is that tribal colleges, our mission statement is to revitalize language and culture in higher education. It's not this thing over to the side. And a lot of STEM faculty, inherently, they struggle with that because we're not taught that STEM is even cultural. So when I came into the math department, they're like, well, Karen, you don't have to do any cultural stuff with math, just, that's hard. But to me, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense because the way that our communities interact with numbers is cultural. It's completely cultural. So why wouldn't that be the first place that you would learn about culture, is in your math class? Any other questions? Oh, everyone here?
Good morning, Karen. My name's Alex, and I work for AHEC, the American Indian Higher Education Consortium. We talk a lot about in our artificial intelligence working group AI policy in the classroom, specifically with faculty members. Can you speak a little bit, you talked in your presentation about opening up AI for use by our adult learners. Can you speak a little bit about the policies you set in your classrooms?
Yeah, so one thing I will say is that when he's talking about policy, I am a faculty member. I will always identify as a faculty member. And when you talk about policies, there's two things people think. One is that the administration will tell you, and two is that everybody will do it the same. So policy would be this kind of shared agreement. For many colleges, because the administration did not come out and say what it is and how to do it, most institutions give you like this 2-sentence line that you stick in the bottom of your syllabus, and then you just completely ignore it. And then that opens up this space where you have instructors who are becoming police, that they think that they can tell when AI was used. And, they want to trap students and, create this environment that's very antagonistic. And especially in tribal colleges or, colleges from communities that are underserved, that breaks that trust. And you don't ever want to create an environment where you're having that student to have to prove their worthiness to you. They're paying to be here. They don't have to prove their worthiness to you. So what I will always tell faculty is before you create even a policy, can you describe how the mastery cycle of learning works in your classroom? How does learning work? Because then you can explain to your students that when they do things that are unethical, how that disrupts that learning process. Can you explain how that works? And so that's where my policy starts, is I can explain the learning cycle, and it starts for me with the 4 directions. So students must interact with me as the instructor. They must interact with the content. They must interact with their peers, and also the culture. Now, in my classroom, culture means that even the way that they are grouped together in groups, we group them in clans. We have elders come into our classroom and they teach about the clan teaching so that students understand the value in what they're contributing even in a group setting. And that is how the mastery cycle of learning works in my classroom. And so any AI policy that happens, it's centered on the mastery cycle of the 4 directions of student engagement for me. Many instructors don't have one, right? So they're trying to police sentences or individual words, but the reality is that you have to understand how that works when you're teaching so that you can explain why what students are doing or not doing is ethical or unethical. And I would argue that many people don't, because we haven't been taught how to teach. And there's a lot of things in andragogy, which is separate from pedagogy. There's a lot of parts of the andragogy where students are coming in with these lived experiences, and if you're not honoring that in your teaching practices, what are you doing? I have a degree, and nobody has yet to be impressed with my ability to do mental math. Nobody cares. But you know what they want to know? Is, can I get a result, and can I get it fast? I know exactly where to go for my resources, and I know how to do it, because I've messed up a lot. I mean, that's exaggeration, that 17 hours, that's not an exaggeration. That was 2.5 days wasted of me switching my email address because I had run out of credits trying to make that crazy avatar sit in a chair. So nobody would have paid me 17 hours for that, right? But because I understand how the learning process goes, and for me, I do not penalize students for learning. You have to make a mistake 10 times. Do it wrong 10 times. So no, I'm not worried about AI replacing me, because my students know that I honor learning, and learning comes with expecting you to be able to do it bad first. Next question.
All right. Good morning. Good morning. First of all, excellent presentation. Loved it. I am a quantitative sociologist, specialization in the family. Love the network, the social network. I was like, wow, love it. So with that, outcomes are what I love to see. Can you tell me, or can you elaborate a little bit? You talked about how you use this network process in your classroom, how your numbers went up in the math. We know working with underserved, underrepresented students, that math is one of those courses that is intimidating for many. And we're all trying to get those numbers up, those success rate up in the math. tell me how you use this model, for what period of time, and then just elaborate more on the number or the increase, or how the light bulbs went on, what you noticed in your classrooms.
Thank you for the question. So the question is about how do I use that model, that social network analysis model, to measure success. So 2 factors that we look at is how long the student stays in the course. We know that in a course like math, they already think they're going to fail. So we have to start, first of all, with growth mindset, productive persistence, productive struggle. And then that particular model is used to measure their attendance, right? So every touch point that they have with their peers, with the content, whether they're logging into Canvas or whatever it is, the material with me in the classroom, many students are required to coach me through a problem. And I make mistakes sometimes on purpose because I'm just like, I'm getting older and if I can't see, I can't hear good, and just all the things. And so students spend a lot of time even coaching me through how to do problems. What the outcome would be is the student's likelihood that they're going to continue the course after week 6, after the first exam. We also look at when they do finish the course, because, some people, when they struggle, they just disappear. And that makes it really hard to find them. But what you will find is when you have that connection of peers and you've built clan systems in your course, students are less likely to disappear because now all of a sudden they are accountable. And I don't do a clan system in the sense that like somebody's the leader and then somebody is because nobody wants to lead when you don't know what's going on. Nobody wants to be called the leader. So we don't use language like that because that's not our way, right? We have navigators, right? It just means I'm holding the map. We have caretakers, right? We have people who are like, okay, I don't know what's going on, and you don't have to, but I have all the tools and you can take in that input. So we look at the likelihood or the predictability of students that will stay in the course, the metrics of them engaging in all of those directions. So all of those have to be there. Even if they only click on the assignment, as long as that tie is there, we know that the likelihood that they're going to finish the course is higher than if they don't have peers, or if they don't have interaction with me, regular interaction with me, and if they don't have interaction with the content. So even just the existence of that tie has increased the likelihood that students will persist through the end. And it's unlikely, it does happen, but it's unlikely that a student will fail if they've made it past week 10. Right? So for us, it decreased our, I think you call them DFW rates. It decreased our DFW rates. Next question, yes.
My name is Atma Sahu, Kapin State University. I'm a little bit confused now. You just mentioned we had to see it to be able to believe it, and this click-based input, one collects and then determine the, make assessment in terms of learning and staying in a course. You mentioned also 40% students are in math, which is a fact also. So math is one of the gatekeeper, as you know. Given the model, you have culture, content, instructor, peers. You emphasize quite a bit culture versus content. My question is to react on what I said, but give me some kind of a predictive your judgment so that AI-based this storytelling programs are being used by students as a homework also, more and more, and starting, I would say, grade 4, 5, 6. And when they get to community college, then they get more of that. But the issue is that when they get to the college. So in four-year colleges, attendance and everything is a big issue. So what you think this AI as a hype is still being used, but what or the other like a modality or AI itself or whatever you think will help us so that the four-year colleges, they don't struggle in terms of completing their course requirement because they have to take a lot of math and other courses. Thank you.
So you're asking what I think we should use, what do I think that students would need so that they can pass their maths at the four-year college?
What like AI we are using and a lot of softwares are coming and a lot of publishers are, they are making, giving assurances that this will work and this will work. So say 2 years from now, I'm not asking 10 years, what are the tools you see will help us in terms of learning so that we can see it, they are learning?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there is an individual who has a brand. His name is Tom Yeo, and he has a brand called AI by Hand. And we're also developing our own called Math by Hand, and it's literally teaching how those systems work, but it's all hand-drawn. It's beautiful. It looks like, almost like a coloring book. So if you go on LinkedIn or if you go on the Googles, I guess Google knows, Alexa knows, Siri knows, but his name is Tom Yeo, and he has a brand. It's an international brand, and it's called AI by Hand, and it literally teaches you how those models work. And you can use that same framework. He teaches workshops all over the world. Right now, I think he's in Europe or in India somewhere, but he teaches all over the world that exact framework so that people understand not just the results of the tool, because it's no different than a calculator. I have students tell me all the time, well, that's what the calculator said. But what did you tell the calculator to do? And if you don't understand what's happening behind that, then you really don't have a deep understanding. So there are still tools that will need to be developed where you have to understand what is happening, what we call in the black box or behind the curtain. And there are modes of curriculum like that, they're just not mainstream. And so that's why, at this point, we need to be able to provide access to those kinds of resources to instructors so that they're not afraid that everybody's using all these calculators, everybody's using all these tools, they don't really understand what's going on, but what do your learning outcomes say? So in your course, what does your learning outcomes say that students will be able to do, and can you scaffold activities like the AI by Hand activities or whatever those activities are? In mine, it's the 4 directions where students have to make mistakes 10 times. How are you ensuring that that is a learning outcome that happens because they're in your course? Because otherwise, that's no different than YouTube University or Khan Academy, where you can sit in Netflix and chill and just have those videos feed you all kinds of information. It doesn't mean that you learned anything, but you experienced the video. Does that answer your question? Yeah, because I told you about 2 tools, but I'll be honest, 6 months from now, those tools will be obsolete and somebody will have, the next thing. So it's not necessarily the tool itself, but what is the outcome you're trying to create by using the tool?
Well, I want to thank you, Karen, and would you join me in thanking Karen on her great talk? Thank you.